So Avela is a Nobel Prize winning organization focused on making sure every child has access to a great education. Our ultimate vision is to build a common app for everything kids will do to make it easy for parents to navigate their child's education and apply to schools and programs with a single click, really using a saved profile for each of their children. We currently offer 4 products as well as services. Avela Explore is our school finder platform, program navigator. Avela Apply is our application system. Match is our lottery tool, which we'll be talking a lot about today. And Enroll is our registration and enrollment platform. And we work with some of the largest charter networks, common apps, and individual single-site charters across the country, as well as large urban school districts, including Boston here. But our favorite customer is NJCF and the Newark Common App. So with that, let me turn it over to Sarah Yan, who is an independent consultant that works with charter organizations and nonprofits across the country. And one of her biggest roles is with NJCF, where she's a director of the Newark Common App. Previously, she was a deputy director at the Newark Charter School Fund. She was a director at Newark Public Schools. She's a Broad resident and a former TFA teacher. So with that, let me turn it over to Sarah.
Thank you. Thanks for the awesome intro, Greg, and nice to be with you all. Thank you so much for coming to this session. I'm excited to talk to you today about our pride and joy at NJCF, Newark Common App, which is a common enrollment system for many of the charter schools in the sector of our community. I will say, even though we are going to be talking about a common enrollment system, a lot of what I'll be talking about today actually is applicable even if you run your own enrollment system at your charter. So hopefully there'll be something for you all to learn about today. So I will give a very brief overview and history of Newark Common App and give a little bit about our guiding principles and our core values. But I'll spend the bulk of the time talking about how we designed our lottery to do 2 things, and that was the title of the presentation. 1, boost overall enrollment, and number 2, increase equitable enrollment at our participating schools. I'll also talk a little bit about how in parallel we designed the application similar to how we did with the lottery to accomplish those 2 goals. And then I'll spend a little time at the end talking about our year 1 results, which we are very proud of, and implications for our broader work at NJCF. So Newark has actually had a common enrollment system for over a decade. It is called Newark Enrolls, and it is a district-run enrollment system. And that worked really well until it didn't. And so there have been a number of factors. We've had our local school district transition from state control to local control. We've had changes in district administrators. And we've also had, as many of you probably know, an increase in just the competitive environment for student recruitment in the city of Newark since the pandemic. And so all of those factors have led to many charter schools saying, we really need a common enrollment system, but the current one wasn't working for them. And the reason why charters came to New Jersey Children's Foundation was because they saw that a common enrollment system really worked for them for 2 reasons. Number 1, it was the best way for families to access their school. Having one single application where they could access a number of school options really worked very well for our families. And they saw that it actually boosted their enrollment. They've seen increases in enrollment in Newark over the past decade since they've been a part of a common enrollment system. And so when they approached New Jersey Children's Foundation, we started discussing an idea of an alternative common enrollment system, and that is what we did with Newark Common App. So we launched Newark Common App in December of 2022, so just shy of 2 years ago. We launched with 8 local education agencies, which are comprised of almost 45 schools, 16,000 students, and over 80% of our charter sector in Newark. Newark Common App, as I've mentioned, is a common enrollment system. So it allows families to rank multiple schools in order of priority, and it runs through a common lottery, which is designed to include preferences for things like residency, demographics, and if they are a sibling or not. And then it spits out is the right word, but the output is a offer to the highest ranked school possible for those families. And we, as Greg mentioned, have partnered with Avela to both host our application as well as run the lottery for us and manage things like our wait lists throughout the entire enrollment cycle. And we were very proud and honored to be Avela's very first application that launched. I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about our guiding principles, our core values at Newark Common App, because number one is a common theme of this presentation, but number two, these really are the concepts that drive our work and help us make decisions as the system administrator for an enrollment system. The very first one is transparency. In Newark, and I'm sure across the country, enrollment is a very big black box. Nobody really knows what happens to applications. Nobody really knows how matches are made, and we really wanted to change that. We wanted to be very transparent about the common set of rules that our families and schools experience as part of Newark Common App. So that was very important to us, that we were clear in communicating with families how their matches are made and what happens to their applications. I think we're all here because we believe in choice, but for us, we truly deeply believe that a student's choice or a family's choice about where they want to go to school is the primary determinant of where they end up. We also deeply believe in equity. I think we all do, but we say that we think that the distribution of high-needs students across the city of Newark should be equal across all schools and LEAs. And that is one of our common goals at Newark Common App. And then finally, our other very big value is access. In every which way possible, we want to make sure that the experience is straightforward, simple, and seamless for all families and for all of our participating schools. And so these are the things that really drive what we do and how we designed our lottery and our application. So moving into that, you'll see the goals of the Newark Common App, our lottery, mirror our guiding principles. And so we believe that we need to match students with a top-choice school. We want to provide a very simple, reliable process for families and schools. We support equitable enrollment for underrepresented student populations. And finally, our goal is to fill seats of our participating schools, particularly having our schools experience greater stability and greater predictability in enrollment. And this is a really important point. I want to pause here because a lot of questions that I do get from charters across the country are, why would we ever participate in a common enrollment system, right? We are competing against other charters. Why would we go in one application with them? And the reason I always give them is right here, right? That it really provides schools with greater stability and greater predictability in their enrollment. So if they know that a lottery has been designed so that the students are matched with schools for which they are most likely to accept an open seat at, then there is no kind of chaos when it comes to offers being made, because families and schools know that the single best offer was made through the lottery system. And they are more likely to accept that offer and then begin registration as early as April, instead of spending the entire summer chasing around families, deciding, are you actually going to show up to the first day of school or not? I'll talk a little bit more about this concept, but it's something I really wanted to underscore. So a little bit more about how our lottery actually works. So we have a single lottery that is held for all of our common application schools, and it matches students, like I've said, to their single best offer possible, and we include preferences for residency, siblings, and underrepresented student demographics. So as part of the application, families are able to rank up to 5 choices in their preference order. And this is important because we encourage our families to put in their true preference. So what is the true order that you want to attend? Your first choice should reflect the school that you most want your children to attend, and so on and so forth. Then, after all of the applications are submitted, we run our lottery. And so each student is then assigned a random number, and we process those applications in that order. So student number 1 is up first. We say, okay, your first choice is this school. Is there an open seat at the grade that you want at that school? If yes, a match is made. If no, we move on to their second choice. This is important because we use something called a deferred acceptance algorithm, which is a fancy way to say that there is no harm if a school or if a family chooses their top choice and it's a highly demanded school. There is no disadvantage if they don't get into their top choice. They don't have any disadvantage for their second, third, fourth, or fifth choices. I wanted to talk a little bit about the equity piece here, which is the preferences that we have put into our lottery. As I've mentioned here, our lottery is designed so that the students that are matched to our schools are the ones that are most likely to attend and accept an open seat at that school. And that is really important because it leads to that increased stability and predictability in enrollment for our participating schools. So here, these are the preferences that we've built into the lottery. One important note is we actually determine these preferences with our participating schools. We spent a long time engaging our school stakeholders to get them to agree to these preferences and feel really good about including these preferences as part of our weighted lottery. So the very first preference, these are in order of how they are applied in the lottery. The very first preference is for siblings. We know families don't want to be sending their kids to school A, then school B, then school C. That's a nightmare for drop-off and pickup. And so the very first preference that's applied is our sibling preference. So siblings of current students first, then siblings of newly matched students, because families that stay together are the ones that are going to accept their seats. The second one, we are very proud of this. We have a new preference, one that's not done in Newark, for homeless and displaced students. Since the pandemic, in the last few years, we've seen an increase in Newark in the number of families that do not have a permanent residence that identify as homeless and or displaced. And so we wanted to make sure, as part of our equity guiding principle, that we have a preference in place for those students. Our third one is our Newark residents that are eligible for community demographic priorities. That's a fancy way of saying underrepresented student populations. So if a participating school has a student population that is under the citywide average for any one of these priorities, that includes, in order, students with IEPs, multilingual learners, and students who qualify for free lunch, then this preference is applied. If a school has a student population that is above the citywide average, then this preference does not apply. So it really focuses on underrepresented student populations at our schools. And then finally, we know that those who are residents of the city of Newark are more likely to attend Newark schools, so we have a preference for Newark residents and then a preference for non-Newark residents. This is also important because this is in many of our participating schools' charters, so we want to make sure that they are in compliance with their charters. So how does all of this actually lead to a boost in enrollment and an increase in equity? Well, these are the main ways. So number one, student rankings are the primary factor that we consider when a student is matched. And so, as I talked about with that fancy deferred acceptance algorithm, families should rank based on their true preferences. There is no disadvantage to ranking for a highly in-demand school. And so families should be very clear about where they want their students to go to school, and that is the primary consideration for which we run our lottery. We also have a simple, transparent process. We have a single application, a single offer, and we are very clear and consistent with our families on how that is run. And so because of this, when families receive their matches in April, they feel like we got the single best offer that we could at the time. We should now move forward and register at our schools, get excited about the start of the school year, right? And that's a very big deal that our students are feeling, our students and our families are feeling ready to register in April and May versus in August. Finally, I think it's clear how Newark ComNap supports equity, but I wanted to underscore one thing. When we are transparent and when we are clear about our lottery, we send the message to the community that not only are all students welcome to apply through Newark ComNap, but they are encouraged to apply. If you are a student with an IEP, if you are a multilingual language learner, it is not something where, our charters are not going to accept you. In fact, you are prioritized in our enrollment system. And so we all know that some charters have a perception issue of how they serve families. And when we are clear about our weighted lottery, we really fight back against that misperception of the fact that we don't serve all students, right? Not only do we encourage everyone to apply, but we give you a slight advantage if you are an underrepresented student population. And finally, as I mentioned before, we use our Newark ComNap to fill seats and promote stability. So because our students are matched to their highest possible choice, they are more likely to accept that seat. As you see here, 78% of our kindergarten applications accepted their offer. Before common enrollment, it was something like 20%. meaning out of every 10 offers a school made, only 2 actually showed up and went through the registration process. That is a lot of time spent giving out a lot of offers that go nowhere. But here, with Newark Common App and with our lottery, it actually is the opposite. Students feel really excited about where they got their match to, and then they're ready to register and start the enrollment process. I also want to add here that we work with our participating schools to tell us the number of open seats that they need, and we encourage them to account for attrition. So we say, don't think about just the number of new seats you might be opening. Think about how many students you lose year in and year out, whether they move to a different state, they go to a different school, or they choose a different school option. And so because we account for attrition up front before the lottery is run, our participating schools don't need to wait to backfill seats over the summer. They can do that up front at the beginning before the lottery is done, and that just helps promote stability and predictability in enrollment. In parallel, so that's how we designed our lottery, but we also designed our application with those same exact principles in mind. And so our application is first and foremost simple, straightforward, and accessible to families. We have a application that is accessible on phone and on computer. The application is designed so that a family can sit down and complete the application in one single sitting in under 15 minutes. And the way that we do that is, number one, we don't require any kind of upload of documentation. So we don't ask for you to find any papers, find your lease agreement, find anything. You can just sit and answer the questions with the information you have about your kids in your brain. Our application only asks the questions that are needed to run our lottery accurately. So what that means is, for example, we need to know if a student has an IEP. So the question is literally, does your student have an IEP? Click yes or click no. We do not say, what services does your scholar need? What programs do they need? Can you upload a copy of their IEP? We simply ask the most basic question to run our lottery accurately. The application is available in 20 languages, and we also prioritize minimal downtime. Our application is only closed for 1 week, the entire enrollment cycle. Now, the best part for me is I can talk about how we designed our lottery and how we designed our application to boost enrollment and to increase equity. But did we actually do that? That's the question. And I'm very proud to say that we did. We are now in the middle of our second cycle of Newark Common App, but these are our results from year 1. And this is a big deal for us because enrollment grew at our participating schools by over 450 students in our first year. And at the level of per pupil funding in New Jersey, that's nearly $9 million of additional funding that's going to charters in Newark. And not only that, I would say that's a great thing. But what's even better for me is the fact that enrollment of our underrepresented student populations grew at either the same or an even greater level than overall enrollment. So some highlights here. We saw a 6% increase in the number of students with IEPs enrolled at our current schools. We saw an increase of 29% for multilingual learners that are enrolled at our current participating schools, and a whopping 84% increase in those who identify as homeless or displaced at our schools. And so we are truly changing the demographics of our participating schools, and we're really, really proud of that. Beyond just quantitative data, even though I love quantitative data, we also collect qualitative data. And so this is our family feedback survey. And as you can see, 88% of families have said that our application is easy or very easy to use, which is a big deal because not a lot of families say that about anything. And so we're really happy. This is a way we track how our access principle is in play, especially for our families and what they experience. And finally, wanted to just talk a little bit about the implications for our work at New Jersey Children's Foundation. First and foremost, I think hopefully you got from this presentation that the rankings and the choices that families make are the primary factor in running a successful lottery. And so we at New Jersey Children's Foundation invest in and continue to invest in making sure that families, when they make those ranking choices, they truly understand what are the characteristics of all of the schools in the city of Newark? How do I know if those are the right characteristics for my children? And how do I access those schools? And so we, again, partnered with Avela to launch My Schools Newark, and we continue to invest in My Schools Newark as a school explorer tool and as a resource and information hub for our families, so that when families are making those decisions about where they're ranking schools, they're doing it in an empowered and an informed way. And then finally, we have to align our grant making with the work that we do at Newark Common App. It's not a lie that we are very proud of increasing the number of underrepresented student populations at our participating schools, but we also recognize that puts a lot of pressure on our schools. And so we want to make sure that we align our grant making with those increased needs at schools so that we can prepare them with the financial and capacity resources that they need in order to better serve those new students that are coming through their doors. So recently in Chalkbeat, we announced a $1 million grant-making program for schools to increase their innovation and programming for students with IEPs and multilingual learners. And we continue to align what we do at New Jersey Children's Foundation with what we're seeing through the Newark Common App.